The next generation should have it easier than the previous ones. This seems to be an issue with every generation, and complaining about how the kids nowadays don't have to deal with X, have never had to Y or experience Z. Isn't that the entire purpose of society and technology? We strive to eliminate unnecessary conflict that doesn't contribute to life in a meaningful way. It seems like every generation is called soft and coddled because they didn't have to experience some product of the time that isn't a necessity. The idea that men aren't men anymore and have it too easy because they don't have to fight pointless wars anymore just seems contradictory to the fundamental idea of progress. If you're a parent, your entire goal should be to make the lives of your children easier than yours. Not only is this achieved through technology but by passing on the wisdom you've learned from your failures and successes. Yes, there's still lessons that are learned best from first-hand failure, but a lot can be taught without having to experience it. Even now many millennials are coming down on Gen Z for things like getting a smartphone incredibly early and just other things in general. I think the best quote I read on this subject: "No child is born into their parents' world. Basically parents and grandparents all came of age in a different time and place culturally, technologically, and a different time in the nation's history. Of course things are different, yes, some things that parents had to work at are now easier, that's just the nature of civilization and prosperity, that's a good thing. I think to some degree as you age you become more rigid in your beliefs and expectations, so change when it's for the easier is frowned upon. There's a certain disconnect between what it means to work hard, if the old way of working hard has been supplanted. I agree with you, but I am somewhat disappointed that this post had nothing to do with Star Trek. It's basically Stockholm Syndrome. You had to slog your way through some brutal bullshit in your life, so you start to love that brutal bullshit. Start to think it made you who you are, nurtured you, and was an important part of your life. So someone else not having to deal with it must be less for not embracing the suck. It might be nonsense, but it's a solid psychological mechanism to make the bullshit seem meaningful. Goddamn Gen Omega with their fucking holotapes. When I was younger I only got a smartphone when I was 4. I don't think it's about making things easier but about learning from each generation and doing a better job. If that means a previous generation was too lax and it had some negative effects, we should pay attention to that and try to rectify with the next generation. That could mean less coddling. I don't like to say people are being whiny or whatnot, but I do think there is some validity to making things too easy. There's hard as in I ran away from home at 14 and worked hard to make life better for you, and then there's hard in I studied hard to get a good job and you can have an iPhone at age 10. It's about how a person responds to their stimuli. I just don't think it's the simple. Curious, what have you heard millennials say about Gen Z? Genuine question. I haven't heard this before. I work with a few Zoomers and I have nothing but praise for them. What am I missing? Preach. The original idea was for the next generation to have a better life, not an easier one. Yes and no. I do think that it seems logical that you'd want to provide as much as possible to the next generation so that they can do the same ext. However, I do feel like once you reach a certain level of, for a lack of a better word, pampering, you start to become less adept to contributing to not only society but also the betterment of your own self. You learn through adversity, and if everything is gifted to you, you end up missing out on that. It's a fine balance. You should absolutely be provided for when it comes to certain things, like access to great healthcare and getting all the schooling you need, but at some point you need to fend for yourself. Also I used the word easier because that's what the op used in the title of the thread. Society grows great when old men plant trees whose shade they know they shall never sit in. Juvenoia is one hell of a drug. I'm not sure Greta would agree. While I agree, I don't think most people's problem is that it's easier for the newer generations. I think their problem is that it's easier but they whine more. I think as a parent you want your children to have a better life than you had, not an easier life. Better may not be easier, but you definitely want your children to go further and exceed what you were able to do with your life. Might not be easier, but definitely better. I agree, the problem is it tends to make people lazy and incompetent. Yes, you have a great point. I agree partially. Yes, it should be easier, but great problem solving is learned by hardship. Also, as far as smartphones, I believe there should be an age limit because of the target advertising, and explicit content easily accessible online. A kid can be traumatized by surfing the web too early in life. Another point with the smartphones is they slow social learning and gaining interpersonal skills for the youngsters, not to mention the suicides contributed to social media. I agree though with life should get easier. The thing is, I'm not sure life will ever be easy either. Innovation seems to never stop.